So, final question. Can you make a key prediction?
For the blockchain space?
Yes.
Interesting. I don't want to say anything too controversial, but I would say that we're going to see a significant portion of every major country's money supply tokenized.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Industry by Mustard Insights, where we explore the forces shaping key industries. Today, we are going to be talking about the blockchain space, which is the technology powering cryptocurrencies. I'm joined with Seun Lanlege, who is the co-founder of Polytope Labs and a bit of a mad scientist in the blockchain world. Pleased to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to be having a very interesting conversation today because the entire world of cryptocurrencies, blockchain, it's mumbo jumbo to regular people.
No, I hear you.
So as a precursor to our conversation, could you shed some light into what cryptocurrencies are? Also, what is blockchain, what is DeFi, and what is Web3?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But I think they're all interconnected. I'll start with blockchains. So, blockchains are a new kind of technology that solve the double spending problem. So maybe a little bit of history. Computer scientists for the longest time have been trying to figure out how we can create digital cash. But if you have digital cash, as in cash becomes data, there's nothing that stops people from duplicating this data and then spending the same amount of money they have, multiple times.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of work as to how to make that happen. I'm not going to go into the full history, of course, because these things take a lot of time. But in 2008, someone called Satoshi Nakamoto, or potentially a group of people, published what computer scientists would regard as the final solution to this double spending problem, where you can bring together a decentralized network of computer nodes that come to consensus on the state of everyone's balances. So the network actually records everyone's balances. It's not that the cash is held as some piece of data. It's that the cash is data on the network, and the network decides who spends what. So that's blockchain technology, and it's been obviously very transformative. It's now a $3 trillion industry. And downstream from that, I would say, is cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies are, of course, this new form of digital cash that live on the blockchain. DeFi is a new industry around the use of cryptocurrencies and the applications of cryptocurrencies. So DeFi consists of things like lending. So lending protocols, which allow you to take loans based off of cryptocurrency assets. There's also exchanges. There's also options. There's also futures contracts. And these are all blockchain applications, financial primitives that actually are blockchain native. And finally, we get to Web3, which was actually coined by Dr. Gavin Wood. He's the co-founder of Ethereum, also the main architect of Ethereum. And Gavin basically envisioned a world where we move away from the Web2 paradigm of the internet into a more decentralized, a more trustless internet. He had fundamental problems with Web2 companies that had become data silos. So they essentially suck up everyone's data and then they monetize this data without giving people back, what's due to them. Amongst things like privacy issues, amongst things like surveillance issues, he felt like a Web3 world would be one where the user actually is fully sovereign. They own their own data. They have, they only share what's necessary. So there's complete privacy. And they also own their own assets, right? So cryptocurrencies are also a part of this vision, but it's a more broader internet-based vision of how we can rewrite the rules of the internet. So that's kind of, a short description of these different terms.
Awesome. So one thing we like to do on the show is to start with a bit of data.
Okay.
In the year 2024, crypto adoption surged 172%, and Nigeria ranks second globally in crypto adoption. So, what do you think is the driving force behind this?
So many things. So many things. So here's a little bit of an anecdote. I traveled to Dubai in 2019 thereabouts, and I was able to spend money in Dubai using my Naira card. I had a Mastercard of all things back then. I had a limit on my account, I think, but I didn't go over my limits anyways. I wasn't that rich. But I could spend and I could buy things in Dubai. I could pay for my food. I could pay for my Ubers, whatever. I paid for my hotel and flights using my Naira card. That is no longer possible if you follow the financial space. All Nigerian banks now issue Verve cards, which are absolutely not portable. You can't even go into Ghana with a Verve card and spend your money. So there's been FX restrictions that have been placed on Nigerians, and this is very recent. There's also the matter of inflation, right? Like inflation in Nigeria is at the highest, around 22%. So these things combined, this being cut off from the global financial system, this inflation problem has seen Nigerians look for alternatives. And honestly, this is what crypto was built for, right? Crypto gives you access to the global financial system and gives you access to a wide variety of cryptocurrencies, which you can use to hedge against inflation. A very popular one is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has mostly outperformed the inflation of all major currencies in the world. People also find utility in cryptocurrencies like Ethereum and stablecoins like USDC and USDT. So these factors, I think, are only going to continue to exacerbate crypto adoption in Nigeria.
Awesome. So, another interesting data point is that crypto users are about 600 million now globally. What does this mean, knowing that we have 8 billion globally, and now we have more people adopting cryptocurrencies?
I think the number is only going to grow, but unfortunately, the number is capped at all the people who live outside of the global financial system. So referring to the global south, like it's called. Unfortunately, the world we live in is one where there's the few who have everything, and then there's the rest of us who kind of exist outside of the imperial core, right? The people in the imperial core have no use for cryptocurrency. They already have financial primitives. They have mortgages. They have loans. They have everything they could need. Unfortunately, the rest of us who live in South America, Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, we don't have these primitives. And so crypto is going to democratize these primitives for the rest of the world. And it's also the case that the global south is the global majority as well.
So, are you saying that there would not be a time where the whole world is using digital assets?
I don't think the whole world needs it. I think there's just a few who do, and then there's the rest who will actually fight against it. The US, of course, is embracing stablecoins. We'll see to what extent that is. But fundamentally, stablecoins are not a good thing for the US and the EU and the rest of these countries who have weaponized their currencies as a way to sanction entire nations, right? It doesn't do them any good to put the dollar on the blockchain where anyone can access it, right? The whole point of the dollar is that you can tell people, you do this or we cut you off from SWIFT, we cut you off from global payments and from global settlements. So, like I said, we'll see to what extent they adopt cryptocurrency and blockchain technology.
Awesome. So, another interesting data point, as of today, total value locked, that's TVL, in DeFi is over 100 billion. So what does this signal in terms of usability, in terms of investor confidence? And additionally, is that a good metric to track the usefulness of whatever protocols are being used for this?
I would say TVL it's not the entire picture. There's also volume, there's also transaction count. And of course, the people who have the highest TVL don't necessarily have the most transactions. They could just be doing deals with whales to pump their numbers and these sorts of things. But I think as a whole, 100 billion is a lot more than, when we got started. Like, I remember DeFi Summer, this was in 2021, 2022, also coincidentally with the all-time highs of Bitcoin back then. People came out with DeFi protocols for the first time, lending, Aave, Compound, Curve. And it just felt like an experiment, right? It was like, who is actually going to use all this stuff? I remember the conversations that were happening on Twitter at the time and sort of around the industry. And now we were here, and it's like, this is now a core part of every blockchain network's strategy to onboarding users, right? Like, users are not going to use blockchains because they like the term blockchain. They need applications, and DeFi applications have turned out to be the most important applications on the blockchain. So in terms of utility, I would say yes, it's a good marker of utility. The actual number may not really matter versus how much transactions are actually interacting with these protocols. And I think in terms of investor confidence, yeah, you could say that this number should signal some confidence to investors, but more importantly to asset issuers, right? So there's also a new category in DeFi, which are called real-world assets, where we tokenize real-world assets and real-world instruments, bonds, treasuries, real estate, tokens, equities, stocks, and the like. And I think this should signal confidence in these people to also issue these assets on-chain, because there's a demand and there's infrastructure to support the tokenization of these assets.
So like NFTs?
NFTs are a completely different thing. I would say NFTs are more of an experiment, fun experiment back then. But of course, the volume numbers around NFTs have slowly died down. Tokenization doesn't necessarily mean NFTs. You can actually tokenize, for instance, NVIDIA stock right now, and people will be able to buy a unit of NVIDIA stock on-chain using, on-chain applications.
Let's go into some more specific areas.
Okay.
What is a blockchain bridge, and what is it about communicating between chains that is so important?
So to answer your first question, a blockchain bridge is a protocol or an application that allows two different blockchains, or specifically applications on two different blockchains, to exchange assets and to exchange data. Why is this important? Well, we have to go back to the early beginnings of the internet. The internet didn't actually start out as this global web of information and websites and data. It actually started out as siloed networks. So you had ARPANET, you had DARPANET, you had all the regional universities having their own sort of intranet. And of course, they put all of their research, they put all of their data and their documents, and this information was basically siloed in all of these networks, kind of like blockchains today, right? And we really only started to see the internet take off when these networks consolidated into one, allowing developers to build applications that could access data from any one of these networks. And that happened towards the end of the 2000s. And of course, we had the dot-com bubble and bust. And so I see what we're building today with all these different blockchain networks. There's over 300 blockchain networks today, and that number is only going to grow, right? But they're all siloed. There's information that exists across all of them that is just not reachable and is not interoperable with each other. I remember seeing, for instance, on the Avalanche blockchain, they partnered with the San Francisco, license registration department to put all of the driver licensing on the blockchain. All right. So now that data is siloed on the Avalanche network. Applications on Ethereum can access that data.
Yeah.
And is the San Francisco Department of License Registration going to partner with every single blockchain? This is just unnecessary duplication of data. So it's important that, of course, this data is on some blockchain, but applications on other blockchains are still able to access them. And the same goes for assets as well, right? People want to be able to move their assets between networks so they can access new DeFi opportunities and new applications, right? Because applications are not going to need to deploy to all the different networks. They can choose a network to deploy to, but still access users, because users are able to bring in their assets and bring in any information that's necessary.
Okay, so my next question is around crypto wrapping, but I want us to tie it into some kind of case study.
Okay.
Right? So let's say I have my Bitcoin on maybe Ethereum, and there's an investment I need to make in Solana, right? So I need a bridge to do that.
Yeah.
So what is wrapping? What does it mean to have a wrapped version?
So token wrapping is essentially, you can think of it as an IOU that is issued by a blockchain bridge. Now, a bridge doesn't necessarily have to be a protocol or an on-chain application. It can also be a custodian, an intermediary, who you give maybe your Bitcoins to on the Bitcoin network, and they give you an IOU of Bitcoins on Ethereum, for instance, right? And there's tons of protocols like this, or custodians like this. We have Wrapped BTC, we have True BTC or Threshold BTC, and there's a few of them, and they all have different levels of TVLs. depending on how much the network, of course, trusts all these different custodians. There's, of course, risks associated with this, right? Because you've basically given your money to a custodian, and there's really nothing stopping them from just taking your money and sailing off into the sunset with it, right?
Saying they were hacked.
And maybe they claim they were hacked as well. And of course, you can't really verify these things. And there's been tons of examples of this over the years. I think the most recent was the multi-chain bridge, which issued a lot of IOUs for assets that were custodied by the developers of the protocol. Eventually, of course, they claimed that they were hacked, and all of the assets that were essentially entrusted to them was moved. And so all the IOUs, all the wrapped assets, essentially became worthless.
So let's come into what Polytope Labs does specifically. So what does Polytope Labs do?
So, primarily we do blockchain research and development. We've been doing this for the better part of 3 years now. But we started working on a flagship product that we thought the industry really needed. It's called Hyperbridge. And Hyperbridge is a blockchain bridge, of course, that disintermediates sort of these custodians that facilitate blockchain bridging. So to be more specific, Hyperbridge itself is a blockchain. Now, the beautiful thing about blockchains is that no one controls them. They are self-executing, they're autonomous, and they're decentralized, right? And this is kind of the core of Web3, is this disintermediation of what would have been trusted intermediaries with now sort of self-executing code. They say code is law. So this is essentially what we're bringing to blockchain bridges. And Hyperbridge works by verifying the different blockchains. So blockchains have a notion of finality, where it's like, okay, once this finality is achieved, your transaction will never be reverted or discarded. It's now part of the blockchain forever. And Hyperbridge is able to verify that this has happened before it then transfers your assets to the destination network, or transfers some data to the destination network. And this is so much more secure, right? Because there's no more intermediaries in this system. It's just one network saying something is finalized, Hyperbridge verifying it, and then passing that information on to the next network. And Hyperbridge, of course, itself is a blockchain, so it's not a person. And it's fully decentralized.
Okay, so a key term is, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is interoperability.
Yeah.
Hope I pronounced that well. Yeah. So what does interoperability do in terms of shaping the future of DeFi and blockchain in general?
I think interoperability is very key to the success of blockchains, in fact, right? A good example I like to use is that, we all use TikTok, we all use YouTube, Instagram. We don't really care where these applications are hosted. We don't care that it's on Amazon's web services. We don't care it's on Google Cloud services. We don't care it's, they're self-hosting in their backyard, whatever. We just use the applications, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing has to happen for blockchains, right? People just need to stop looking at, okay, I'm on this network, I'm on that network, and simply think in terms of, okay, I have these assets on the blockchain, right? And I want to use an application. It doesn't matter if the application is on the same network my assets are on, or on a completely different network. There needs to be infrastructure that allows the seamless movement of assets between networks, so that users can access Web3 as a unified whole, rather than as this fragmented hellscape that we currently live in.
Okay, so one thing I've tried to do is find the similarity between what's going on in the crypto world and traditional finance. So in terms of swapping cryptos versus bridging them, what kind of example can you use to relate this?
Yeah, sure. So, swapping essentially occurs when the asset already exists, in these two different networks. So, good example is USDT, right? USDT is issued across all the different networks. And if you want the same USDT on the other side, someone essentially has to give you the USDT that they have in exchange for the USDT that you have on a different network.
Yeah.
Whereas bridging would mean that there's already some unified bridge that binds this asset across all the different chains. And so you can essentially burn the asset on one chain, and that asset gets minted, it's recreated like a teleportation to the other side. Of course, swapping, comes with liquidity costs because I'm taking on a risk of the network that you're currently on. Maybe I was on Polygon because I liked Polygon network, but now you're on Ethereum and I don't like Ethereum, right? Maybe Ethereum is too expensive, and so I would actually charge you some percentage of the money that you wanted to swap for, just because you're giving me an asset on Ethereum, and maybe I don't really like Ethereum. But bridging removes this like liquidity costs because you get the exact amount of the asset that you want to move around, right? So it's purely fungible across networks.
So, like an example here, I'm in Nigeria, I want to move to Ghana, I would literally need to swap my currency.
Exactly.
But if I was in the EU, I would be able to use it across all of the different countries.
Yes, there's a unified bridge, the EU agreement, right?
So that is bridging.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So a little bit of background on Hyperbridge. Hyperbridge says it's the first multi-chain protocol.
I mean, it's the first verifiable multi-chain bridge, yes.
So first question, is it that there are bridges that are only for single chains, and you guys hacked the multi-chain?
Well, it's two things. So there's already tons of multi-chain bridges, but they're all driven by or powered by custodians, right? There's custodians at the center of all these different bridges. All of the major bridges are powered like a central bank. And these are just people, somewhere you don't even know where they are. And there's risks, of course, there's counterparty risks associated with these bridges. Now, on the flip side, there's actually a few verifiable bridges. There's like a few bridges that actually don't introduce any middlemen, but they are constrained to only bridging two independent networks. Okay. They can't scale to multiple networks. So the innovation of Hyperbridge actually is scaling this secure bridging architecture to the multi-chain, right? So to be able to accommodate as many blockchains as can exist.
So I like that you touched on risk. We've heard stories of bridges being hacked and all of that. So what is the advantage that one Polytope Labs brings to Hyperbridge to ensure that it is risk-free? And what is basically the advantage?
So, I mean, I guess I can give you a little bit of a history. I've been working on core blockchain technology for the past 6 years. I got started working on, Ethereum itself with Dr. Gavin Wood, one of the few hires out of Africa, I guess, or, if any other hires actually. So I have a lot of experience with blockchain technology, working on Ethereum. I worked on Polkadot, which was his second product. And having had that perspective of how blockchains actually work internally, we decided to bring these learnings into building out Hyperbridge. So I would say that's definitely one of our advantages. But I'll say our second advantage actually is also the Polkadot network. So the Polkadot network is actually, I would say, a step ahead in terms of blockchain technology. Like, mind you, was built by the person who built Ethereum, right? And taking all of his learnings and all of his mistakes and building sort of a next generation product. And of course, having had experience with Ethereum and Polkadot and seen, the stark differences, we saw opportunity in building a bridge on top of the Polkadot network. So these are, I would say, our two advantages: is our experience with the blockchain technology and the advancements of the Polkadot network.
So that's pretty interesting. So can you share some key metrics with us? Metrics around maybe fundraise?
Yeah, for sure. So we launched Hyperbridge back in November 2024. Since then, we've closed our seed round of $5 million. We've secured around 10 partners, which are independent teams and L1s, blockchain protocols that are building in the space, who have signed on to use Hyperbridge as their native bridge. And we're on track to release our own applications on top of Hyperbridge, which will allow, end users to use Hyperbridge as their daily bridge, right? So right now it's mostly been a developer-focused product, but now we're expanding our products into everyday users.
What does this mean for your company in terms of scale? So what's the next phase looking like?
User-facing applications, integrating more and more networks. We have plans for Polygon. We have plans for a few privacy-based protocols. And just continuing to grow and expand and just consume the entire multi-chain, honestly.
So, but in the general blockchain space, what would you say are key trends that we should look out for?
I would say stablecoins for sure. I would say stablecoins are emerging, and this is my own opinion, of course, but they're emerging as defense technology. Imagine if people had access to local stablecoins, so some version of the naira on the blockchain. They would be essentially able to access the global financial system natively, right? They could no longer be sanctioned or sent or censored or like removed from the global financial system. You have USDT on chain. You can always swap for USDT and pay anyone who only accepts USDT, or maybe someone only accepts maybe the digital yuan, for instance, right? So you could always swap for that and send that to that person. It would Trade would no longer be constrained by how much FX was in the central bank. It would now be constrained, honestly, by how much is on chain.
I love the idea of it being a hedge against inflation.
For sure.
Yeah, but how do you balance that with the risk element of it, since it's quite volatile?
Stablecoins aren't supposed to be volatile, right? Like stablecoins are supposed to be pegged to some fiat currency.
If it is pegged to fiat, then is that not back to the original problem?
Yes and no. So the problem with fiat is that it's controlled by the banks.
Yeah.
They tell you, oh, you can't spend more than 100K a day, or you can't do this, or who are you receiving this money from? Whereas on chain, you don't have to answer to anyone, right? You receive as much as you want to, you spend as much as you want to, you do trade with whoever you please. So stablecoins essentially elevate fiat into permissionlessness.
Okay. So interesting. So where do you see blockchain bridges in, say, 3 to 5 years? And in terms of interoperability, how would you say that? Do you think that we'll always need bridges, or we'll get to a world where there will be this communication across heterogeneous chains?
Where do I see blockchain bridges in the next 3 to 5 years? I see the industry finally moving on from custodial-based bridges. I see major bridge hacks happening that really shake the fabric of blockchain and crypto, and sort of renaissance of the original reasons why we built this infrastructure in the first place, which was to remove intermediaries and to essentially return back to tradition of secure and verifiable bridges. Do I think that bridges will become outdated or invalidated? That's not going to happen, right? Networks are not natively interoperable. They are siloed, and that's by definition. That's actually why they're secure, is that they're siloed. They're this sandbox environment where only a few things can change what happens, and these things have to be like authenticated, right? You sign a transaction, and then that changes that sandbox so to a certain degree. So blockchain bridges will always be needed. I think the only problem would be, is there some bridge architecture that can really scale to the rest, to all possible blockchains that can exist, right? And this is where I would say that like the Polkadot technology should really be able to handle that load, right? So I think last year there was a test on the Polkadot network, on the live network, to see how much transactions it can really hold. Now, mind you, up until now, the Solana network had been boasting of a theoretical transactions per second of around 70,000, 80,000. This is entirely theoretical. This hasn't been demonstrated. But the Polkadot network pushed around 140,000 transactions per second on mainnet. So this was a coordinated effort to essentially spam the network with as many transactions as it could handle. And it did this with only 25% of its capacity. So, theoretically, we could say that there's potentially around 500 million transactions per second that the network can handle. And so to that end, I'm confident that the Polkadot network can become the central hub for interoperability for the multi-chain, through Hyperbridge, of course.
What do you think is the greatest misconception about the space you're in? Cryptos, bitcoins, what do people say? I mean, blockchain rather.
I mean, from the blockchain front, I think there's a misconception that blockchains are ledgers, like they're databases. And honestly, there's a very, very funny tweet on Twitter that I always like to go back to. I just laugh and show people. So someone was trying to convince the founder of Wikipedia to put, the whole of Wikipedia on the blockchain. And he just responds like, we already have a database, it works well. Like, why do we need the blockchain? And this, I think, is at the core of how, and this is a technical problem and a sort of technical misconception, is a lot of people think of blockchains as being a database. They're actually terrible databases. A transaction on a blockchain takes like minutes to settle, right? So that it becomes useful. I think Ethereum takes around 20 minutes. Even the best blockchains take around a few minutes to sort of write to the blockchain. So that's terrible latency. So they're not actually databases. What they are verifiable computers, right? They are computers that are publicly verifiable. And the reason we use them for finance and the reason we use them for everything else is really because of that verifiability. It's not because they're great databases or whatever. They're terrible databases, but they are great at being verifiable. And so I think that, perspective shift is actually what, for me anyway, birthed Hyperbridge, which is where we realized actually we can use a blockchain as a bridge. No one else was thinking about this in the industry, and we're one of the first people to actually do this. So yeah, that's, I would say, a big misconception about blockchains. But I would actually want to talk about crypto as well. Like, a lot of people are now sort of pushing this idea of crypto as a sort of get rich quick scheme. I am fundamentally opposed to this. There's now traders, there's now all sorts of like influencers that say, buy this coin, buy that, buy this, you'll be rich. This is, to me, the greatest threat to crypto, which is where we forget that it's actually built to liberate our financial systems, and it now becomes a gambling parlor, right? A Ponzi scheme. It's like when Jesus came back to the temple and they turned everything into a gambling parlor and a business center. Like, we've now co-opted the fundamental reason why this technology was built. And I hope that that's not the case, right? Like, historically, all these Ponzi schemes have all come and gone, right? We remember the ICO era. We remember the, I want to say, NFT era. Now we're in the meme coin era. Now AI agents era, and all these sorts of like Ponzi's that people keep like reinventing on the blockchain. They don't last long. And ultimately, what lasts longer are things like DeFi and stablecoins and the fundamental utility that these things provide. So that's a misconception, and I hope people stop falling for popular traders that may say buy this, buy that, and focus on how exactly can I use this technology to access the global financial system and to do trade in ways that are impossible with the current financial systems.
When you say blockchain is not a ledger, are these contracts not all stored on these chains?
Oh, for sure. The contracts are stored on chain. But that's not why we should use them. Right? The reason we use them is because they're verifiable. It's because we want to remove trusts, right? So maybe a good example of this is the NASDAQ, the NYSE, right? They are a centralized custodian of all of the world's, maybe not the world's, but the US's, stocks and equities. And this has created, the most ridiculous forms of exploitation in the world, one of the biggest, and honestly. So there's this thing called high frequency trading, which is where if you can position your servers as close to their servers as possible, what you can do is you can see orders when they come in. And if you see they're trying to buy some stocks at some certain prices, and if that price is maybe just below the current market price, you can rush in, buy very early, and then resell. And this industry alone has extracted trillions of dollars from the markets. This is the problem with centralization and centralized intermediaries. And that's not to even speak of the market manipulation that happens behind the scenes, right? Whereas with on-chain exchanges, this can't happen because you're talking to a decentralized network. There is no central authority. So you can't possibly front run anybody. So this makes markets more efficient by design, right? So this disintermediation makes things more efficient, reduces costs, and all in all, reduces trust. And this is the most important thing for the world moving forward, right? The world is moving towards a place where there's less and less trust in the world, and these trustless systems are becoming more and more valuable.
So I'd rather look at cryptocurrency as a store of value, right?
Yes.
Now, how would you say people should balance this in terms of, on one hand, I'm trying to store value, and on the other hand, I'm investing in a few shit coins just so I can actually get rich, because we can't take that away?
That's entirely, up to you, caveat emptor, like it's buyers beware. But when that fails, don't say it's a problem with crypto or blockchain. That was a failing on your judgment. This is what I would say.
So how can people tell the difference?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to know whatever it is you're investing in, right? Like, I think one of the most successful investors, Buffett, he says like, if you don't know what you're investing in, then you're the exit liquidity. Like if you don't actually, understand the metrics, the markets, things that drive the price up, things that drive the value to the token or whatever. If you don't know these things, you just saw somewhere and you're just going to buy it next thing. That's not a good idea, right? Like that's just gambling.
Right.
That's not investing.
So generally, what would you advise anyone coming into the blockchain space specifically?
I mean, what are they coming here to do is the right question, right? Like you can't just join the party and we're now in crypto. Like what exactly are you trying to do?
There's a lot of money, so I'd like to.
I don't think that should be the motivation for anyone to join the industry. I mean, I joined way back like 7 years ago. Like we weren't at 3 trillion, right? Like we were still very, very low. But I believed in the vision. I believed in sort of what the technology could become, and I'm really, really glad I'm vindicated right now. With the stablecoins and the proliferation of this technology. But I think people have to have motivations other than money. I get it. Like people want to make money, but in my experience, money is not found if you're looking for it. It's actually found when you find something you love. Where it is. Love is actually what will keep you there and give you that specific knowledge that then will pay off after. But if you don't have love, then you're going to drop things very, very quickly and move on to the next thing. And you just keep doing that and you never find money, right?
So final question. Can you make a key prediction
for the blockchain space?
Yes.
Interesting. I don't want to say anything too controversial, but I would say that we're going to see a significant portion of every major country's money supply tokenized.
Is it like a digital currency in Nigeria?
You mean like the e-naira?
Yes.
Probably not like the e-naira. Probably more like a currency that's issued on a public blockchain that's backed by whether bonds or other kinds of regulated financial instruments.
Are there countries already doing this?
So in the US right now, 1% of the total money supply is already tokenized.
Okay.
Which is an insane number. That's around $250 billion of the US dollar tokenized already. And there's projections it can hit 10%, by the next decade.
Sounds like great numbers.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely going to, like I said, vindicate the rest of us who have been building this infrastructure from day one.
Yeah, that'll be all. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Looking forward to seeing what Polytope Labs has to do or has to offer to the rest of the world.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
That's it on this episode of Industry by Mustard Insights. Special thanks to our guest, Seun, for helping us navigate this very complex world. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.